There's this odd kind of pattern in the Bible. Anytime that you see a woman coming to the forefront, a woman taking her place as a key figure in a story, it tends to be when there's a failure happening by men. There's a way in which the order that God had set out for his people was not being followed, and the men in society were not fulfilling his plan. And so in those instances, the women, Ruth, Mary, Mother of God, Mary Magdalene, they are these instances of correction. They are the thing that men come in contact with that show men that there's so much that they could be, that they are not yet, that they have to develop in themselves to be the hero, to regain what had been lost. And I think that's kind of happening today. You're seeing these women stepping into men's roles, and not in a way that is healthy for either men or women.
Hello everyone, I have a guest today. Her name is Analisa Gomez. Analisa is a student in the inaugural 2022-23 class at Ralston College, aspiring to bring knowledge from this master's program she's pursuing with its emphasis on Western tradition to the publishing industry. Upon deciding to follow a passion for storytelling, Analisa transferred to the University of California in Irvine as an English major in 2017, where she was drawn to publishing through her involvement in a new form creative writing journal class. She worked as the associate editor. She graduated in 2019 and moved to New York, where she worked. She interned at a New York publishing house before applying and being accepted to Ralston College Masters in the Humanities program. So she took a chance, she came and decided to go with, there were 1,000 students that were applying and they chose 25. And I went to Greece with Dr. Peterson for a bit, and we observed what they were learning there. They were learning ancient Greek and modern Greek, and they were visiting ancient biblical sites. And I thought the students were remarkable. They were all very enthusiastic and grateful. And I asked Analisa if she wanted to speak to me. And she said yes. And so that's what this is about, is just me talking to her. And I always just let the conversation go where it goes. And that's what happened today. So thanks very much. Hi, Analisa.
Hi, Tammy. How are you doing?
Hi. I'm really good. It's so nice to see you.
Yes, it's great seeing you too. How's the tour going?
It's going pretty well. We have 3 weeks left.
Okay.
We're in Antwerp, Belgium today. We were in Amsterdam yesterday.
Jeez, you guys, it never ceases to amaze me how much you guys get around. It's incredible.
Oh, it's pretty busy. It is pretty busy, but everything is going well. The lectures are going well. Jordan's feeling good. I'm feeling fine. So, and we have lots of help. Our security team is very good. And my financial people say, wow, you're spending a lot of money on security, but they're not just security, they're logistics as well. And so they make sure that I get something to eat, and that I have a place to stay, and that they know the way to the theater, and that the theater is all checked out and they understand it. There's a lot to do. And we don't have to do that. All we have to do is pay attention to what we're doing, and that's all. So then we're not distracted terribly, which would make it difficult for George to focus, So I think it's good. And we've been told recently that when you're on a venture, you have to think that 10% of what you're making has to go to charity, kind of, but not exactly charity, but to something else. And so 10% of it can go to the help that we need to hire. And that's good, right? Because then your community's bigger and you have more help. It's good.
Yeah. And they, from the few days that I saw them in action, they definitely accomplish a lot. You have good people around you. It's good.
Yes, it sure seems that way. And I'm curious about you're on an amazing adventure, I think. I mean, I'm on a moving adventure, but you're on a learning and moving adventure. So I don't think no one who's going to listen to this will have any idea who I'm talking to. So if you would give a brief introduction to who you are and what you're doing right now.
Of course. So my name is Analisa Gomez. I am a student in the inaugural year for Ralston College. And so basically what that means is it's their very first master's program and the first year of it in humanities. And so this first term, which started in August, the beginning of August, and is ending at the end of this week, has been in Greece. Yeah, we're ending on the 29th. And so it's been in Greece. We've been learning the language, both ancient and modern Greek. And then we've also been learning a lot about the history and how this has all really extended from thousands of years ago, the roots of Western history being not just in the culture but in the language too, and how it's been able to continue all this time and develop into what we know now as the West. So it's been quite an adventure, the biggest one of my life so far.
Yeah, I imagine it is. So what is the farthest back that you study?
Okay, so we recently went into a little bit about the Mycenaean culture, and so I want to say I want to say that's a few thousand years specie, and it's around when linear B was being not just developed but used very frequently right
Tell me what
before.
linear B is.
So linear A and B are the first developments of Greek language. It's you see nowadays we're more familiar with just alphabets as far as Greek. You have alpha, beta, gamma, delta. But linear B and A, they also had pictograms included in it. So these were the beginnings of the Greek language. And so we see that this language has been used in some form since it's just every time I think about it, it's just so stunning to think that not only has that language been continuing for so long, but also a sense of that culture has been continuing for so long. The Greeks have a very strong identity of culture, one that I've come to very much admire in my time here.
So how much of the world as we know it was Greek way back then?
So if you're talking about Alexander the Great, he went into Asia Minor, and as far as we know, as far as I've come to understand it during the program, Crete, the Minoan society on Crete, it's where the first documented, or at least what we've found documented example of that. But so Crete, and then into Asia Minor, up into Europe, where Greece is now, the islands surrounding it, and also they had an extensive also trading relationship. The Mycenaeans, I believe the Minoans as well, with Egypt, with through Asia Minor, and then into Europe. So Greece. It's interesting that Greece hasn't been perhaps the largest empire looking back, but they had far-reaching influence, and I think that's still pretty evident today in how the West has come to take shape, and the tradition that we have, being able to see it so strongly progress through Europe and then into the New World, into my hometown of America, I suppose.
So what would you see in your hometown of America that would be something that came from Greece?
So in America, we have obviously there's the democratic tradition, democracy, America's a republic, but a lot of the ideas came from Greek philosophy, Greek ways of conducting politics. And then also, I would say in the storytelling, which I very much have fallen in love with as well, especially seeing these, you kind of see different, there's different ways in which people in those stories, when you look at, let's say, Achilles in the Iliad, how stories have kind of progressed since then, how you've seen these ideas of gods having influence on mortals. And it's been really interesting for me to kind of see this development into this move inward into it's something internal that you have to bring under control. It's not so much the gods, but so those struggles, those even some of those archetypes are still very prevalent in how in the West we tell stories, how we see the different journeys that characters will go into, hero's journey, things like that. And so been that's something that I've personally been more interested in. In one of the reasons I was attracted to this program was because I wanted to learn more about where those stories developed out of, because I'm so interested in how we're telling stories today, what the stories that we're telling ourselves today, and how that influences us.
Mm-hmm. Now, so you're doing also some work on the Bible. Are you doing any work on the Bible, reading the Bible?
Yeah, so we're
how do those two things relate? The Greek, learning historical Greek, and Greece, and the philosophy and what was written in the Bible, in the Old Testament.
So we have read a few passages from the New Testament because the original language of the New Testament was Greek. And it's been really fantastic, especially as a Christian, being able to approach those texts in their original language. So on top of that, on top of approaching it, the language, and seeing how deep some of these, when you try and translate, you kind of you can lose certain meanings. And so to see it in the original language with all the meaning that it can entail, it really opens up the text and adds so much depth to it. So there has been that aspect, but also learning how the Greek traditions and ideas and philosophy of the time when Christianity was blossoming in that area, or this area, I suppose, has been really fascinating, because you see these similar ideas, these similar values start to I suppose converge on each other. And one thing that came into mind when I was looking at this, and this idea of one God, of this idea of self, this idea of I suppose divinity, in a sense, being a part of humanity. It was really interesting to see how sort of perfect the timing was for all these things. As a Christian, you have that belief that everything that unfolded all the way until now are things that have been prophesied and have been fulfilling, in a sense, what was always meant to be. And so seeing all these things, all these ideas converging at the same time in that specific place, it really was a perfect moment for Christianity and the gospel to be able to spread throughout the West, or the development into the West. That's been really fascinating to me to look at.
Have you looked at the because Greece is very temperate. The temperature, the climate is very temperate, right? So it's not an extreme weather. Uh, there's no extreme winter there, and I guess maybe there's extreme heat there. I don't know. I've never been there in the summer, but I imagine it might get pretty hot. But then they have the ocean, which would cool it. The winds would cool it. But when I went there, and I was there with you a little bit, I went to Samos Island with you, and that was an amazingly beautiful place. And but what was amazing about that place is there's springs underneath. There's water springs underneath the island, and so the island is green, which I never expected. I'd never been to Greece. I never expected that it was going to be that green, and it was absolutely beautiful. And the water was perfect. So we were there in September, right? The water was perfect. The weather was perfect. And I think part of me thinks, oh, no wonder there's so much history here. Like, where else would people be?
Right, right.
Naturally, like they wouldn't have been having this kind of deep thinking and negotiating as if they were at the North Pole. There'd be other things to do. You'd have
Yes,
staying alive being one of them, and finding
exactly.
food and finding food. But here was this place, and it's so I find, oh, I go there and I think, oh, it's no wonder all of this happened here, and it's no wonder that there's been many different people wanting to live there and be in control, because
Hmm.
people like to be in control, or they think that that's a good thing to do, so they
Right.
are always vying for being the one that's in control. And it just seemed to me, oh yeah, I see now. I grew up in northern Canada, where you have other things to think about because of the weather. There, I don't see that that's a problem. So think of all the time that you could devote to uh, communicating, communication.
Hmm.
And so I think you guys going there gives you such an insight into how different was it back then, right? Do you feel kind of, because you're learning ancient Greek, how different was it back then compared to where you are now? What does it feel like?
It's it's very interesting that you bring that up because I thought about that in a sense in contrast to because Mediterranean climate here in Greece is very similar to back home. I'm from Southern California, and we have a Mediterranean climate there as well. And it was very interesting because I was considering that the fact that say Pythagoras, Samos was where he was from. All these great uh, all these great philosophers came out of Samos. And I think in part it was due to the fact that there is a not just the abundance of the land. Uh, Samos is very unique as a Greek island because it has the springs beneath it, and not other. There aren't many Greek islands that are so green. But I think having our opportunity here in Greece, in a sense, almost mirrors that because we have this devoted time to Greek, and you think of the way that Pythagoras had Samos as his home, had an abundance there. It was a very rich island, uh, and it allows you so much opportunity to have this deep connection with your thoughts, with the earth, have opportunity to really dive into all of these different areas that, like you said, you wouldn't really have the opportunity to otherwise. Everybody who is here, all the students that are here had to choose this over something else. So there's this idea of giving something up, but you gain so much because you have so much time to focus in on what to you, and I believe we're all here because to all of us, it's what really matters, what's really important. And Pythagoras was able to do that, and we're able to do that now. And it's interesting to see that, to see going after what really matters, what's truly of true value, compared to back home in California. Because back home, at least in where I am in Southern California, there's the same abundance. There's the same richness in the earth. If you plant something in California, it'll grow. It's such a beautiful state, but people have sort of lost the connection they have with what's around them, and has the abundance that is present in California, in the US, has in a sense been lost on them, instead of, at least where I am, what I see in California, it's a tendency towards looking more internally, and not in a positive way, in a type of self gratification type way. You have all this abundance, and so why not just indulge in it? As opposed to, you have all this abundance, why not see how you can improve as a result of that? How you can not just yourself, but also others as well. And so I think that's something that struck me being here, is Pythagoras it was, at least from what I can understand and how I see it, all these Pythagoras, all these philosophers, what we're trying to do here is very much an attempt to enrich our lives through thought, through meaning, through value. And in doing so, hopefully extending that outward into the places we go into from here after Ralston, this network that we're building. Whereas in California, I don't see that happening as much. It's very much something, it seems far more selfish. It seems a bit more like narcissism in California, than from what, and I try to say that with as much humility as possible, because I know I can turn, I have those moments where I'm like, you know what, why not just go for another gelato? but it's really interesting to see how it's that easy to have your foundation off by just a little bit, and it become a shift from what you can accomplish for yourself and others towards what can I satisfy in myself right now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, that's very well said. I'm thinking, so that reminds me, I was in London a couple of days ago. I was there actually when the Queen's funeral was on. I was in London.
Wow.
And I got to be there. And I was very grateful to be there. It was a powerful moment, and there were something like 4.4 billion people who watched it that day. That's really something, that shows the strength of her reign, the strength of her reign. So anyway, so I was in London, and I had gone to the National Gallery with Jonathan Pajot. Jonathan Pajot was there. And Jonathan Pajot is often, Jordan invites him to go, with us here and there, because he's got such a great understanding of the stories in the Bible and the patterns, so that you can understand what's going on in the Bible. So we go to the National Gallery, and I went with him, and we went into the medieval part of the gallery. So we were looking at all the icons, all the Christian icons. And he explained something to me that I hadn't understood up to that point, which was the story of Mary. So there's Mother Mary, the Virgin. So there's her story, where, the angel comes down and she's filled with Christ and accepts that as her destiny. So she's humble and accepts what is coming to her, and is grateful for it. So there's Mary, who is that person. And then there is Mary with baby Jesus. So then she's mother, and so then she's all giving. So she's all compassion. She's total compassion in the best of ways, right? Because an infant, we're born so early that there's nothing they can do. So they're totally vulnerable. And so a mother has to be at a baby's beck and call. And you don't question whether your baby is crying, whether the baby should be crying or not. You just answer the baby's cry, so it's just complete compassion. But then there's Mary Magdalene. And I hadn't separated Mother Mary from Mary Magdalene. I hadn't really thought about them being the same, but different. And so Mary Magdalene, the story of Mary Magdalene is one of being, of more of a multiplicity of somebody who is the subject to men. She's subject to not just one man, but many men. She's someone who is more out in the world and dealing with the fringes of society. And they're on the fringe herself, right? They're on the fringe herself, but dealing with the fringe and inviting the fringe in, kind of inviting the fringe in. And I hadn't thought about that being, those are both Mary. One is the Virgin Mary, and one is Mary Magdalene. And Mary Magdalene is in a way, she's the one who's out, Mother Mary, she's in the house, she's in the home, she's with family, that's where her place is. But Mary Magdalene, she's out in the world, she's out in the world. And what are the temptations that she is subject to? And you mentioned narcissism. And I was thinking, the things that are going on in our society right now are, they look like female narcissism of compassion. So compassion gone amok, practically, because compassion is exactly what has to happen if you're going to take care of babies. But it's absolutely not the thing that happens in a boardroom,
Right.
or out in society. That's not a political, that's not where what happens in politics.
Mm-hmm.
It's not all about compassion. It's about, there's some justice, right? There's justice out there.
Right.
And anyway, I just wanted to mention that I just ran into that thought. So I'm just putting it out there, something to think about. But I don't know. Maybe you already know about that. I mean, you have a lot more experience with Catholicism or with Christianity than I do. So what do you think about that idea?
I really enjoyed that idea. I myself haven't given that, or rather, I hadn't considered it in that way. Quite, it's very interesting when you look at women in the Bible. It's something, being I'm a storyteller at heart, and so I love seeing how stories unfold and sort of reveal themselves to you, and what they're offering up for you to gain from them. And so it's really interesting to see these instances of women in the Bible, how not just how they're portrayed, but the situations in which they come to the front. Because and I think I had mentioned this too, when we were talking in Ephesus. Oh, I'm sorry, not Ephesus. Istanbul. There's this odd kind of pattern in the Bible. Anytime that you see a woman coming to the forefront, a woman taking her place as a key figure in a story, it tends to be when there's a failure happening by men. There's a way in which the order that God had set out for his people was not being followed, and the men in society were not fulfilling his plan. And so in those instances, the women, Ruth, Mary, Mother of God, Mary Magdalene, they are these instances of correction, of and you see this in modern stories, or rather you did until more recently. The women in these stories are a corrective. They are the sort of the thing that men come in contact with, that show men that there's so much that they could be, that they are not yet, that they have to develop in themselves to be the hero, I suppose you could say, to have to regain what had been lost. And there's and I think that's what's kind of happening today. You're seeing these women stepping into roles, men's roles, and not in a way that is healthy for either men or women. Normally, you would see this happen in the Bible. It's a corrective, and men are able, the men of the Bible are able to pick up what they had dropped and carry it forward. And it's a cycle that continues. And I think we've come back around that cycle, but it's really interesting to see how, especially femininity, sorry, in stories nowadays has kind of been cast aside, instead of being this motivating force that is a drive for men to step into their proper roles. It's kind of been, femininity has kind of been something that's cast aside in favor of women simply being more masculine, in favor of women simply being in those roles. Instead of elevating both, femininity is cast aside, masculinity is favored, but only if it's a woman in that role. Because if it's a man in that role, he's oppressive somehow. A man has to be the sidekick, or he has to be kind of incompetent in a sense. And it's a trend that I've seen in stories recently that's been very concerning, because especially these stories that we tell ourselves and tell our children especially, they're so important, and it shows how a society views itself and also its own people. And seeing these women placed into these roles that degrade a key aspect of what it is to be a woman, to be a mother, to be a homemaker, all these different things. Seeing that degraded is very concerning, because it's damaging to both women and men. It's damaging to girls and boys, and it's really heartbreaking to see that happening. It's been really interesting to see what Disney has done with this. Disney used to be such a creator of culture, and Disney, either explicitly or maybe subconsciously, kind of knew the culture that they were attached to, and knew that there were ways that they could be a part of it, could progress it, take these fairy tales, bring them, not just fairy tales, but tradition itself, and bring them to the next generation to show all these different aspects of men and women, and the value of both of them. And now that's kind of fallen by the wayside. And it's growing up with Disney. It's very saddening to see that happen, because the princess stories especially were so well done in showing how valuable both the princess and the prince were. And it's really sad to see that fall apart.
Yeah, I think that's a very good observation. I think that you said that just exactly the way it has to be said. You know, one thing that's interesting is when a woman chooses a husband. I know that a man asks a woman to marry him, but really a woman, it's up to women to say no to men. You know, when we're teenagers, it's up to women to say no, because they'll ask and you say no. And as long as you say no, then you're still in the game of single woman growing up and finding her prince, pretty much, you know. And what is a woman looking for? So a woman's looking for a man who will be a father to her children. And so someone who is climbing in status, so that when she is vulnerable, because she's going to be home for a bit when she first has her baby, because she's going to be totally immersed in taking care of this infant for a little while, who is that husband going to be, so that she can trust him to be that man. So women have always and men, they don't choose women for that. They choose women because they love them. They choose women because women love them. They choose them because they love them and the women love them. And that's good enough for a man. But a woman, no, she's looking for status, right? She may be looking for other things too, but she's definitely looking for status. And so a woman has always been in support of her husband and in support of her children and her community, right? So that's been her role largely throughout history. But then we've been taught in the universities, in feminist classes, we've been taught that women need to support themselves. They need to learn to support themselves. And fair enough that we need to support ourselves as well. That is definitely part of the story that has been, if you understood the story properly from the Bible, you would know that we are to support ourselves as well. But for some reason, that idea has been lost. And so we've thought that we had to tell it again. But the story that's been told now is for women to support themselves, which is fine, except for women aren't supporting their men. And so if you think of a woman supporting a man who's on the rise and she's doing what she can to help raise his status, which will raise her status and the family status and the community status. So that's how that worked. Now it's women raising their own status. Well, why have a man? Like, why have a man anymore? And why be interested? I'm not going to be interested in that man if he's not in a higher status. So all of a sudden men, and I wonder, and I don't know, but I wonder if men actually need to be supported in order to strive for their status, and that women aren't supporting men the same way. Now they're taking their places instead. Well, then why not just go home and play video games?
So, you're right. So there's actually been some really interesting examples of that in literature over the past several decades. And I think it's not just the support, it's also women, kind of like what I was talking about in women in the Bible. You see them kind of carrying the standard of what is valuable, of what is good, and what men should be not only striving to become, but strive to be worthy of it in a sense. So let's say, okay, so one example is as far as a woman supporting men. For women supporting men, there's been this odd occurrence, and when you were mentioning compassion kind of running wild in the culture, there's a good example of this. There's a book called House of the Spirits. It's by Isabel Allende. I want to say it came out in the 70s, but I could be wrong. And there's this idea of women being able to break the cycles of violence, that intergenerational, any type of cycles that men produce, that men perpetuate. But there had always been something about that story that irked me. And what it was, I realized this not that long ago, maybe a couple of years ago. What it was is the very first instance of breaking a violent male cycle was actually the matriarch of a family, the family that this book is centered around. The matriarch of the family, one of her sons was participating in a kind of rite of passage that all of the young boys went through in the family. There was this huge tree in their courtyard, and the young men in the family tried climbing the tree, and whoever got to the highest point, they were the top dog in the family, right? So one day, one of the sons goes up to the top of the tree, gets higher than everybody else, and he did it. He was born blind, and so he accomplished this fantastic thing. And unfortunately, when the young man is on his way back down, he falls to his death, and it's terrible. But so what happens is the mother decides to cut down the tree and take away this sort of rite of passage And of course, it's horrible that this young man had died, but taking away, taking like and in doing so, removing the support of the for facilitating positive masculinity, of facilitating the growth and development of positive masculinity and becoming a man. Taking that away, I don't think Isabel Allende realized that when she did that, it was creating the circumstances for men who did not have to face the trials of becoming a man. And so we're stuck in a state of immaturity. Mm-hmm. She, like, the mother was, by not supporting her sons, by mothers and women not supporting men to grow into the greatest that they can become. That's what creates these cycles. It creates it because it creates men who aren't men, who haven't proven themselves, not just their own strength, but proven themselves within society. They're taking their place. Those are the men that create those violent cycles. And so I don't think Isabel Allende was realized that that's what was happening when she wrote that. I think she was focusing more on this idea that it's men just have this bent in them to dominate, to be violent, to manipulate, and women have to step forward to stop that. But if that compassion is taken too far, then it creates the very circumstances in which those cycles continue. And so that in that sense, that compassion taken too far, the support and protection taken too far, doesn't create heroes. It doesn't create the men who can become heroes. It creates boys who haven't realized that they must improve themselves in order to create and be a part of a functioning society. So there's that part of these women of support, and taking away that support when it's needed the most can really break down not just boys and men, but can lead to a breakdown in society as well, because that book basically ends in a war, and that's the point that it got to. So there's that, but there's also with women this idea, like I said, of being not to dip too heavily into your husband's work, but of being this almost force of nature that men must develop themselves in order to, in a sense, contend with. Because when you're looking at marriage, there's this kind of give and take, this push and pull in marriage. And so in order to become the man, or rather, women have to be that force of nature that is not just something to contend with, but it is something that's enticing too, because that's the princess. That's when you look at, let's say, there's like Snow White's a good example. Beauty and the Beast is a good example, actually, because when you look at Belle and the Beast, Belle starts to sort of fall for the Beast after he saves her from the wolves. But that doesn't break the curse. That's not true love yet. And then the Beast decides to let her go, save her father. In doing so, he completely rejects any part of being a beast. He becomes ineffective, essentially. He's going to let Gaston kill him. He's given up. He's like, all my aggression has been nothing, has done nothing good for me, has like, I've given up this woman, I've given up on myself. There's no positive to this beast that I am. And even then, when Belle comes back to him, he still doesn't transform into the prince. Isn't he still isn't a prince yet. It's not until he's not the hero yet. It's not until he takes back a certain amount of that beastliness of that monster that and protects Belle, kills Gaston. That's the moment into which he finally becomes the prince, finally becomes the one that is worthy in a sense, that has built himself up into the prince that has the beast under control. And that is finally on par with the princess that is worthy then, that has gained that status of being one that can contend with this force of nature, which is what femininity in movies, in these stories, has always been. Has been a force of nature. Both there's been negative, there's been positive. That's Maleficent and Sleeping Beauty. But that so there's so much that goes into the portrayal of the feminine, and there's so much that is necessary on both sides, and that has to be not just taken into consideration but valued in relation to the effect that it can have on the people, the other women, but on men and on society broader. And how, if it's not handled and approached with the proper respect that femininity deserves, not, of course, masculinity is valued just as much, because women want a prince, and not just any prince, not just somebody who dresses nice, but like we learned this word in Greece. It's odax, and it means with teeth. So you want somebody with teeth that can provide for you, can protect you, and fight not just alongside you, but be somebody that you want at his top, on his top game, not just for your own benefit, but because as a unit you're becoming something greater. That's another thing these stories always did, is as a unit they elevated everybody around them. They elevated their community and then the kingdom, and you get the happily ever after. And it's only in those situations that that's able to happen. And so the breakdown of that, of the value of femininity, I think more so than masculinity, because now you just see women in masculine roles, and it's okay when it's a woman doing it. But there's this way in which femininity has been sort of cast aside, and you just see men in the lower tier roles. That's kind of like what happened in Moana. Not my favorite Disney movie, but that's what you tend to see happen. You just see, and I don't. It's some that maybe I don't know if you have any insight on this, but it's something that I can't understand, how feminism, quote unquote, has come to devalue femininity. I don't see how that has happened, and I think you might have more. I haven't looked too deeply into how that's come about, but it seems that that's what's happened.
Yeah. Well, I was never one to pay any attention to feminism, but I've decided that that's important, and so I'm going to. I've asked a scholar, a feminism scholar, to go through the figures in history who were instrumental in bringing about the changes in society that feminism has brought. We're going to go through one at a time, And I'll read some papers. She'll read some papers, and we'll discuss them on my podcast. One thing that I'm curious about, and I don't know enough about it, but I think it's really important, is the birth control pill. Because in the early 60s, all of a sudden, women were just like men. All of a sudden, we could decide how much sex we wanted to have, when we wanted to have sex. It didn't matter. And it didn't matter anymore. And that was only 50 years ago, no, 60 years ago. That was only 1960. Yeah, 60 years ago. So not even a lifetime ago yet. So we don't know what that has caused. And I know, and if you look at that broadly, then what has that done to who women think they are? Like, do women still think they're women if they don't have to have babies? Right? And so then what is a woman's job in society? Does she have the same jobs as men? And then do we need men if we're not going to have children anymore? It's really scary. What has happened since the birth control pill has been used widely. And that's something that we don't know the end of yet, but that we don't talk about. Maybe we just don't know enough yet to talk about it. But I think what we're seeing has something to do with that. I really do. I mean, I don't think the birth control pill is good for people. I know I took the birth control pill when I was a teenager, and it made me depressed, so I didn't take it. So, and I don't know what the side effects are like for people. I know they were terrible for me, but I'm a pretty sensitive person, so they might have been more troublesome for me than they might be for other women. But it's worrisome that women are taking the roles of men now, and that the birth rate has gone down so much everywhere. I mean, we don't know what to do about that. That's a multifaceted problem too, it's also an economic problem. And but I think that hopefully we're going to start talking about some of these things, not just on my podcast, but on more podcasts and in more books, and investigating women's roles and where we are and where we might be, where a better place might be. For me, being married has been a good thing. I've learned a lot. I've had a couple of kids. I have 3 grandkids now.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you. I have a 5-year-old granddaughter and a 2-year-old grandson and a 4-month-old granddaughter, and it's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. I'm so grateful to have been in a relationship where my husband and I negotiated our parts and really didn't leave anything to chance. We really just talked about everything. And I think that, like you said, a woman and a man can come together, be somewhere as a unit that is a good influence on each other, so they can be better together than they were apart. They can be more together than they were apart. And I hope that each woman can find a place for herself in society that can fulfill those deep feminine needs that we all have, if we just go somewhere quiet and just try to find out what's true.
Yeah.
It's really something to talk about. I mean, I didn't even expect to talk about this today, but here we are,
right,
talking about this stuff.
Yeah. It's a very important question that has to be really, I think, taken apart and really and have a deep dive into, because as the world changes, as these new technologies and new opportunities open up before us, it's very important that we take time to reevaluate where we have been up until now, because anything that goes forward, there's obviously this sense that it's not moving forward without a momentum from farther behind. Everything is there's a force that comes up, and that's another reason why I was so interested in this program, because the Western tradition, the history, the culture that has kind of propelled us on this trajectory is something that has an incredible worth and value, because if not, then it would have puttered out long ago. And I think that one issue that might be to blame for this uncertainty with how we move forward is the loss of not just a sort of reverence, but also a gratitude for what's gotten us here. Because it seems that these traditions, these the ways in which we've learned to view ourselves and our place in the world has kind of been thrown aside, because there's not just a lack of gratitude, but I think also that narcissism. It's that that's how it was before. We can do something better. Like we don't need. We can just throw that all aside. And I don't think they realize that they're not just throwing it away. It's not something that they hold and they can toss away. It's something that you stand on and build on top of. And so I think that's something that is contributing to all this, is that we don't realize, or a large portion of society does not realize, that they're kicking out the stones from beneath them, and thinking that they continue to rise higher. And it's extremely misguided, but also it's incredibly prideful, I suppose you could say. There's this odd sense to it that, and it's that kind of teenage adolescent sense, like I know everything. I know what's best for me. I don't need my parents or my grandparents or even my great grandparents. I don't need that input. And it's not something that I can say I quite understand, because as somebody, I had the good fortune, and I was blessed really to be able to meet all except maybe one of my great grandparents, and learn everything that they had to go through to accomplish throughout their lives, just for me to be in this moment here. There's no way that I can really look at anything that I have been, I guess, privileged to have without a deep gratitude and an ever-present knowledge that so much had to be fought for and even suffered so that I can have what I have now. And so I think it's a real lack of appreciation for how our culture and how our own identities, our own like identities as of the self has been brought up until this point, because it seems like the ways that we, or I don't really want to say we, but like society as a whole is kind of looking at where they think they can go and where we believe we can get to. It's something that one of our professors, or rather, one of our professors of ancient Greek had mentioned. It's like you're opening a door to the forward, but and opening that door, you're leaving a window to the past. You have to keep those in mind, because if not, who you are, it's hard to know who you are if you don't know where you've been. And it's kind of this lost idea that we have now. And I think you're right, where this, like the pill, all these new developments, it's so much so fast. It's easy to get caught up with, and because of that, this identity that took thousands of years to create and bring up until today has either been lost or is actively being cast aside because they don't understand the value of it anymore. It's archaic to them. It's old news.
Yeah, old news or actually no news if they don't know about it, right?
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, the last thing I think I'd like to bring up is the fact that AI is coming, robots are coming, and the necessity for ethics in our robots. I mean, I think each of us has a divine spark within us. I believe that. And so I have hope for mankind. But we are building an army of robots, and it's up to us to have all our ducks in a row so that those robots have a clue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? And so that's why these conversations are so important to have right now, and to try to bring a little bit more understanding to the subtleties of the conversations. You know, this isn't something we can use a sledgehammer for. We have to talk and be careful with our words, and be grateful for our forefathers, and refer to those books, those great minds that have put down words for us in a way that we can understand, so that we can understand where to put our next step, where to, what to look at, and how and every moment, at every moment, and every word.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do when you go back to United States? Because it sounds like you're going back to United States in a week.
I'm going back to California. I'm packing up everything I can in like a day, and then I'm taking a road trip over to Georgia. I'm gonna be my parents. I'm so grateful for all how supportive and helpful they've been throughout this whole thing. They're going to be towing my car out there, so it's going to be the three of us. We're going to visit some family along the way, but we'll take about a week to get out to Georgia, see some family, see some good some beautiful sights along the way. That whole part of the country is so beautiful, especially along Route 66, which I highly recommend if you ever get the chance to take.
What do you see along Route 66?
Oh, what don't you see along Route 66? Route 66, it goes from Chicago, so Illinois, Missouri. It touches Kansas, and then it leaves immediately, and then you're in Oklahoma, the Panhandle of Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, and so you get these beautiful views of the Southwest. You get the deserts, the mesas, if you want to take a slight detour, there's the Grand Canyon, the Painted Desert, and then you start getting into all the white sandstone in New Mexico. La Ventana is a beautiful arch in New Mexico. And then Texas, there's some wacky things in Texas. There's the Cadillac Ranch, the Slug Bug Ranch. Oklahoma's, when I went through Oklahoma, I was actually, I kind of fell in love with the landscape in Oklahoma. The ground is so red, and then you get these beautiful greens sprouting out of it, or you get gold of the grass in the summertime. So Oklahoma is really beautiful. And then Missouri has a whole lot of caves, caverns, which are fantastic, really incredible. And then you're in Illinois, and you can see where Lincoln was born, and you can you end up on the shores of Lake Michigan. And so Route 66 is really uh, is a really beautiful kind of, I don't want to quite say summary, but it gives you a little bit of everything that the West and or the Southwest and Midwest has to offer. It's really quite spectacular.
Oh, that's nice. It must be fun to be able to think about that now. Because, well, I guess, do you have exams this week, or what do you have?
Oh, we just took our final on Friday. So
Oh, you're done.
yes, we're done. Now it's just us getting through. They're doing a little bit of filming for the college. They've been doing that for a few days, and then we're going to be going to historical sites, learning a bit more about history. We're going to, I think Delphi and Olympia are next up on the list, and
Oh,
then
wow.
it's yeah. I every time I talk about this, I'm like, oh my God, I'm doing this. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, it's just this has just really been such a blessing and such an opportunity. And it's I'm here talking to Tammy Peterson. If you had told me that months ago, I would have I wouldn't have believed you.
A good year. This is a good year.
Very good year, and
Mhm.
there's much more to come, and I'm very excited to see what this all holds.
Yeah, well, I'm very excited for you. I think that what I saw, just a little bit I saw in Samos and Istanbul, um, it was remarkable what you're learning. And I hope that at some point we can catch up with you guys on another portion of the year. And I think we probably will. Who knows? You still got some time. So we'll see what we can do.
That'd be fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
Well,
It's
I've been looking forward to talking to you ever since I left. So it's
oh,
been really very nice.
thank you.
Very
I
nice.
Yeah, yes, I've been so excited to get to have more conversations with you as well, because these I took some time. I listened to a few of your podcasts, and I think that what you're doing here is incredibly important, because you have these deep these deep topics of of what it is to be a woman, and also like religion, and how these things intertwine. And it's so beautiful, and it's so refreshing to be able to hear these topics being brought up in earnest, and with good intentions, understanding the importance of them. Because I know when I was going through university I was at UC Irvine in Southern California. That's where I did my bachelor's, and it was really interesting to go through there and see these great uh, these great writers and these great ideas and things that I had come to understand as valuable, starting to be chipped away at, and not in like a positive critical way, where you could be like, okay, let's see, maybe like there's a way that this could be better, maybe there's a way that we can take this and bring it forward, and improve and uplift, but really to break down. And so, and femininity, I think, was one of them. And when I did English major, but I also did their creative writing emphasis. And it was really interesting. I had this one situation in which I was doing my final for the last class in the creative writing emphasis, and I was dealing with all these ideas, because prior I had been a STEM major, but I just storytelling was just where my heart was. So I couldn't stay away from it any longer. Um, and then going in with all these ideas of science, of our place in the world, and especially as a woman, trying to tell those types of stories in that setting was difficult. It was actually difficult, and to tell this professor a story about what it was about nature, and like mother nature, and all these ideas, and it like not hitting, not it like it just doesn't, it doesn't click in those areas. These stories are about you. These stories are about the world that you inhabit, and these ideas, this, and it was actually really relieving. After I did that writing, and after my professor said something along the lines of, "Did you just base this off of some other story?" After hearing all of that, it was actually quite comforting. I found your husband's work after that, and I was like, "All right, I'm not crazy. Like these are key ideas," and I didn't realize how ingrained they were in literature prior to that. But it's really been quite something to go on this journey as a result of that, and see how crucial these ideas are, these ideas that I've always been playing with in writing, but in I suppose the universities, they haven't been valued as much.
Well, we still have the books,
Mm-hmm.
right? We still have those authors. Those can be our teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And you're seeing that now. You've been going through a program that's based on the very old texts,
Yes.
and there's value. That's where the value is finding your teachers in history.
Yes.
We don't need to take what's going on now as gospel, because it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So see,
Right.
now the light is shining on you. I can see the light shining on you. uh, well,
Yeah.
thanks very much. That was a lovely conversation.
Yes. Yes, it was.
Oh, it always is. It always is.
Yes. I don't think I've had an, a conversation that I didn't absolutely love with you while you were here, and also conversations with all the students here have been fantastic.
That's so good.
Yeah,
Mm.
getting the opportunity to do that, opportunities that I haven't really been able to have prior, has been fantastic. And also, it's everybody's so encouraging here, even like with writing, which I've always been hesitant to share. They've been very encouraging. So ideas, writing, it's just been a pleasure to have
Well,
all
I look
that.
forward to finding out what you write.
Oh.
So I'd like to be, you could keep me up to date with that. If you have something that you write and you think that you'd like someone to read it, I'd be happy to read it.
Oh,
So,
thanks. That's such an honor. Thank you so much.
oh, I'd be happy to. That'd be wonderful for me. So yeah, keep that in mind for sure. And it takes a community, right? All of this takes a community. I know for sure that we can't do this by ourselves.
Right.
There's
Yes.
right. So we're in this all together.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
And
the more we communicate with each other, the better, the stronger we'll be.
exactly. Yeah. I know coming into this, I knew, and it was part of it, I think it came from being a Christian, but a lot of it was that I'm here for a reason, and that reason isn't solely self-serving. I'm here in this community now, and I have to take into consideration what my role is in that, and how to fulfill that role to to my highest ability, and hopefully it's a position and a role that I step into for the glory of God. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's, I'm glad I'm incredibly grateful to be here. And so I'm very much grateful to to everybody involved with this institution, including you and your husband. So to you also, I have a deep, deep gratitude. And so thank you very much. Not just for this podcast opportunity, but also for everything that I've gained just in 2 short months and what I know will come after.
Yeah. Well, yes. Right. Hope,
Yes.
faith,
Yes.
hope, and service.
Exactly. Yep. That's the
Yeah.
that's the plan.
That's
Sticking
the
to
plan.
it.
Yeah. Okay. Oh boy, this is wonderful.